Welcome to Eagle Claw YouTube channel. We have left behind the whole 7 months of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and the 8th month is going through a legendary and incredible progression, where the Ukrainian heroes are much more dominant. While there are logistics management, military administration, and chain of command collapse in the Russian army, the successes of the Ukrainian armed forces depress the entire Russian army. The Russians no longer want to fight against Ukraine in the Russian army, and are trying every possible way to escape or surrender to Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky launched the I Want to Live campaign against Russian soldiers the other day, and a hotline has been set up. The Ukrainian administration reports thousands of calls to this private line. While the Russians refuse to fight against Ukraine, the number of Russians who want to fight against Russia and who are fighting against Russia in the Ukrainian ranks is also increasing. Even months after the Russian army invaded at the behest of President Vladimir Putin, more and more Russian citizens are fighting alongside the Ukrainians. There were hundreds or even thousands of Russians who were in talks against the war, occupation, regime, and ideas of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russian fighters numbering at least in the hundreds describe Putin as the enemy, even as they take up arms against their citizens. The Kremlin's war against Ukraine is a war many Russians do not want to fight, and some of them are so vehemently opposed that they are ready to take up arms against their country and fight alongside the Ukrainian army. In the first week of April, 3 men wearing military suits and black ski masks faced off with journalists in Kiev, where they announced a new battalion called Liberty for Russia, made up of entirely Russian citizens, including former POWs. Russia's Freedom Legion claims it was formed after March when more than 100 Russian soldiers surrendered to Kiev forces. Addressing their Russian friends, they said they were morally enraged by Moscow's lack of discipline and open disregard for human life. Apparently, the Legion consists of former soldiers, as well as Russians who traveled to Ukraine with other foreigners to fight the Ukrainian army in the months after the invasion. The group's most high-profile member is Igor Volubov, a former director of state-owned Russian bank Gazprombank. Born in northeastern Ukraine, Volubov spent most of his life in Moscow, but fled to Ukraine after the invasion, and announced in June that he had joined the Legion to make Russia a free democratic country. The Russian administration has toughened treason laws, and those who fight against the country in an armed conflict, hostilities, or other acts can now face up to 20 years in prison. Besides the risks of being captured by Russian forces, fighting for Ukraine forces those enlisted in the Legion to face a moral dilemma. This is one of many units, from Georgians to Belarusians, operating as a part of the International Legion of Defense of Ukraine established by Kiev at the beginning of the war. However, unlike other national units, Russia's Freedom Legion, from full size to where it's fighting, is cloaked in secrecy. The Legion pledged to fight for a new Russia and to get rid of the dictatorial regime of President Vladimir Putin, as it described the manifesto in April. Soldiers in the unit use the white-blue-white flag, which has become a popular symbol of Russia's anti-war movement. Of the captured Russian soldiers, there are Russians who spend their days reconnaissance, spotting potential artillery targets and bringing medical supplies to Ukrainian soldiers on the front, or joining the Ukrainian legions directly to fight against Putin in the line of fire on the hot front. It extends to political dissidents such as the 30-year-old Russian IT worker who wants to be called Jan. No Russian should have crossed the border with a gun in their hands, the Russian who fought for Ukraine, condemned Jan, said in an interview in Kiev. I am here to oppose Russian aggression and defend Ukraine. He presented a valid Russian passport but asked for a pseudonym because he feared for the safety of his family in Russia. He said he moved from Russia's Ural Mountains to Kiev 3 years ago for the fear that he would be jailed after his office was raided. Jan, who describes himself as an anarchist, had participated in demonstrations against the Putin administration. I thought I would either die as an invader and murderer or die with a clear conscience. That's why I switched sides, said a 26-year-old former Russian soldier who is a member of the Legion, asking to be referred to by his pseudonym Arnie. Russian Arnie, who fought on the Ukrainian side, said he had decided to join the Legion to fight for the light side. One of the Legion's most closely guarded secrets is its size, with estimates ranging from a few hundred to more than 1,000 soldiers. Ukraine's presidential advisor, Alexei Arestovich, said in June that the group had several hundred members. But the Legion claimed in May that it consisted of 2 fully manned battalions that could potentially mean more than 1,000 fighters. According to Arnie, precise information on the number of soldiers is classified, but he said about 300 requests are sent each day to join the unit. This does not mean that so many people are joining us on a daily basis. We should review these requests, and Russian intelligence services are also trying to send spam, he said. Seeing the war as a contest between the forces of darkness and light, the Ukrainian government uses Russia's division. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin's efforts continue to rot under pressure from the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian attacks in the Kherson and Kharkiv region are incessant. Many places in these 2 regions were liberated by the Ukrainian armed forces. In the face of the pressure of the Ukrainian army, the Russian army has so far only found the solution by fleeing. Even if they show very weak defensive resistance, most of the time the Russian army leaves the region without firing a single bullet at the Ukrainian armed forces that come upon them. The gains made by the Ukrainian armed forces come sadly, because the Russian army evacuated most of the Ukrainian civilians in the area it passed through. Through war-torn pine forests and rolling hills in northeastern and eastern Ukraine, fuel trucks, tanks, and pickups rumble through muddy roads, passing completely destroyed, abandoned towns and villages to attack. In Liman, a strategically important regional center recaptured by the Ukrainian army on Saturday, a day after Russia declared the region's annexation, the winds are howling over city blocks, where every house has turned into piles of bricks. Putin, on the other hand, still continues his actions after the great suffering he caused to the geography of Ukraine. But everything is going bad for him. After Putin's latest partial mobilization decision, a very serious escape organization started among Russian youth. Russian men began to flee in every direction from the east to the west of the Russian Federation. There was a flock of people fleeing to the Russian borders. At the same time, very serious protests broke out in almost every region of the Russian Federation, especially in Moscow, and Putin suddenly turned Russia into hell with his decision. Meanwhile, the Russian army has been receiving heavy defeats in both the east and in the south for the last week and has started to retreat completely. Ukrainian troops stopped their advance along the Dnieper River in the Kherson region, which was part of the counteroffensive. A Russian military official also said that Ukrainian forces were unable to break through the defenses in the area. However, broadcast satellite images show us a 72-kilometer Ukrainian advance in the region. The Ukrainian armed forces started the ground operation that it had been preparing for months and managed to reach 72 kilometers behind the Russian lines the day before. Kherson is one of 4 regions in Russian-occupied Ukraine that the Kremlin continues to annex, following referendums that were widely condemned as illegitimate. Putin delivered a defiant speech advocating the ongoing war on Friday. But Putin has been making this challenge since the first day of the war. Now he only has some threats left, and so far Vladimir Putin has not been able to act on any of the issues he threatened. The president of Russia should always consider the possibility of disintegration of his army. The Russian army has been trying to fight in very harsh conditions for about 5 months, and there is an increasing uneasiness with each passing day. For this reason, if the war in Ukraine does not end, we can all witness the dissolution of the Russian army in Ukraine and the collapse of the Putin regime. Thanks for watching.